Rain lashed the empty LA freeway as headlights swept over a trembling puppy chained to a battered blue suitcase, left behind in the storm, a cardboard note begging, "Please save him." Ashley, exhausted after a double shift, slammed on her brakes. Most would keep driving, but she dove into the downpour, risking her life to save a soul even more lost than herself. What she found wasn't just a dog, but a story of old wounds, second chances, and the kind of courage that only grows when you have nothing left. Before we begin, where are you watching from tonight? Share your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe that sometimes saving another is the only way to save yourself, hit like and subscribe for more true stories of hope and healing. No one forgets the kind of Los Angeles rain that turns highways into rivers and every underpass into a trembling world of shadow and sound. On a night like that, thunder crawling over the city like a restless animal, Ashley Bennett gripped the wheel of her battered Honda and tried not to think about all the places she'd rather be. The wipers squeaked across the windshield, barely clearing the streaks. Radio static and the drumming of rain filled the car, a lonely symphony as she crawled along the I-10, headed home after another double shift at the clinic. The city glimmered, broken and smeared, in the puddles and the darkness. A flash of movement near the off-ramp caught her eye. A frantic, four-legged silhouette darting in and out of the cones of the passing traffic. Her heart skipped. She braked, tires skidding a little, breath fogging the glass. For a moment she sat frozen, torn between the long, hard day behind her and the old, unshakable ache to help anything lost or hurting. Then she swore under her breath, flicked on her hazards and eased to the curb. The rain hammered her as she bolted from the car. A tangle of shadows waited beneath the overpass, dumpster, shopping cart, and in the narrow shelter between, a trembling German shepherd puppy, maybe 5 months old, tied to the handle of a battered blue suitcase. Lightning flickered. Ashley stumbled, almost falling, and as she neared, the puppy's eyes fixed on her with a wild, haunted plea. A battered cardboard note dangled from the suitcase handle, soaked and almost unreadable. "He needs peace. Please save him." Ashley crouched, her voice gentle, hands splayed open. "Hey, buddy. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help." A truck roared overhead, spraying water, making the whole bridge shake. The puppy flinched and whimpered, shrinking against the suitcase. Ashley saw then. The leash knotted tight, the shivering, the matted fur. His eyes flicked from her to the suitcase, as if the entire world depended on that battered object staying by his side. She inched closer, talking low and soft, rain plastering her hair to her cheeks. "It's all right. Let me help you." The puppy barked, sharp and raw, a sound full of terror and warning. He jerked against the leash but refused to move, nearly choking himself in his panic. From behind, headlights swept across them, and a second later, a delivery van barreled down the off-ramp, swerving wildly in the rain. For one split second, Ashley thought they were both about to die. She lunged, grabbed the suitcase and the puppy in one desperate motion, and yanked them both clear just as the van's tires skidded and the horn screamed through the storm. They landed hard, half on the sidewalk, half in the weeds. Ashley's knees hit concrete, her heart slamming so loud it drowned out everything else. The puppy was sprawled across her lap, still chained to the suitcase, whimpering and trembling, but alive. She wrapped her arms around him, rainwater and tears blurring together on her face. "It's okay. It's okay. I've got you now," she whispered. The words meant for herself as much as for him. It took several minutes for her hands to stop shaking enough to untie the leash. The puppy, his tagless collar scratched and fraying, wouldn't let her take the suitcase away. Every time she moved it, he whined, pawing desperately, his entire body rigid with fear. There was something in the way he pressed himself against the battered blue fabric, something so raw and desperate, Ashley felt her own chest ache. "Okay, buddy, the suitcase comes with us," she said softly. As she bundled the puppy and the suitcase into her back seat, the interior of the Honda filled with the smell of wet fur and old leather. She glanced at the note again, the words already fading in the rain. "Please save him." The plea echoed in her mind, pulling old, hidden scars to the surface. Memories of foster homes, of suitcases packed in the middle of the night, of being left behind. She drove straight to the Santa Monica Rescue Center, the only place open after midnight. The lights inside were harsh and fluorescent, the walls echoing with barking and the tired voices of staff and volunteers. As Ashley carried the puppy and the suitcase in, people stared. A stray found in the middle of a storm, chained to a relic of someone else's life. At intake, a tired attendant asked, "Name?" Ashley hesitated, looking into the puppy's wary, golden eyes. "Atlas," she said finally. The name fit, something strong, holding up the weight of the world, even if he was just a puppy lost in the storm. As the shelter staff took Atlas for a medical check, Ashley sat down, shivering on the bench, the suitcase balanced on her knees. Something thudded inside as she shifted it, a soft, uneven weight. She hesitated, then flipped the latches. Inside, a torn blanket, a battered stuffed elephant, and half-buried, a child's pink sock. No name, no clue, just a thread of heartbreak woven through every item. She closed the suitcase and pressed her forehead to the cold, damp leather, fighting back tears. Atlas's story was still locked away, hidden in the silent pain of a shivering puppy and a suitcase full of loss. In the harsh, humming light of the shelter, Ashley made a silent promise. To herself, to the puppy, and maybe to every lost child she'd ever been. "You're not alone anymore. Not tonight." The Santa Monica Rescue Center was chaos on a good day, but the aftermath of a citywide storm meant triple the usual number of strays. Cats meowed from stacked crates, dogs barked at every shadow, and the scent of bleach and wet fur clung to everything. Ashley stood at the front desk, rain-soaked and bone-tired, her hands still trembling as she tried to explain Atlas's situation to the overworked manager, Maria. Maria eyed the battered suitcase, then glanced down at Atlas, who lay silent and unmoving at Ashley's feet. The puppy wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. He stared only at his suitcase, as if the entire world had narrowed down to that single fragile thing. Ashley pressed her case, desperation in her voice. "He's traumatized. He needs more than just a kennel. Maria cut her off, voice sharp but not unkind. "Look around, Ashley. We're bursting at the seams. Every animal here's got a story, and half of them are as sad as his. You know the rules. 5 days for strays. If he doesn't improve, if no one steps up." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Ashley's jaw clenched. She'd volunteered here off and on for years, but this was different. The puppy at her feet was no longer just a case file or a project. He was a living, breathing heartbreak, and Ashley couldn't bear the thought of him slipping through the cracks of a system that was already stretched thin. As she signed the intake forms, a young tech took Atlas gently by the leash. He resisted, digging his paws into the linoleum, but Ashley knelt and spoke softly. "It's just for a little while, Atlas. I promise. I'm not leaving you." He let himself be led away, but not before casting one last, desperate glance at his suitcase, still clutched in Ashley's hands. The shelter's social media volunteer snapped a quick photo. Atlas huddled next to his suitcase, the note visible. Within hours, the image was posted online. By morning, it had gone viral, shared by animal lovers, local news, and inevitably, by internet cynics, who saw yet another sad story in a sea of sad stories. The attention brought a flood of comments, both hopeful and skeptical. Some read, "Someone please foster this sweet boy." Others, "Why are so many animals being abandoned? We need better laws." But the loudest voices were the ones that stung Ashley the most. "No way that puppy is fixable. Once they're that broken, it's over." People just want a headline, not a real solution. Ashley scrolled through the comments, feeling her chest tighten. She recognized the pain in those words, the cynicism of people who'd tried and failed too many times. But she also saw the hope, the strangers offering donations, the families volunteering to help, the kids drawing pictures of Atlas with big, hopeful eyes. The city's pain was on display, but so was its kindness. The shelter phones rang off the hook. News crews arrived to get their sound bites, cameras flashing as Maria and Ashley tried to answer the same questions over and over. What's his story? Why the suitcase? Does he have a chance? No one had answers. The only certainty was the clock ticking down. 5 days. Inside his kennel, Atlas barely moved. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink, wouldn't respond to the gentle overtures of volunteers. Every time someone approached, he'd edge closer to the wire, pressing his nose against the bars if the suitcase was near, retreating to a corner if it was moved even a few inches away. The battered blue case became a symbol, not just for Atlas, but for everyone who saw him. The whole shelter started calling him the suitcase dog. Ashley spent every free moment with him, sitting cross-legged on the concrete, reading aloud from dog training books, or just talking in soft tones about nothing. Sometimes she'd bring her own old teddy bear and set it next to Atlas, hoping the scent of childhood might comfort him. But he barely glanced up. He'd curl himself around the suitcase, eyes dull, body shivering whenever thunder echoed outside. Every night, as she drove home to her tiny apartment, Ashley replayed her own memories. Late nights in foster care, clutching a battered suitcase of her own, never sure if the place she landed would be home or just another stop. She couldn't bear the thought of Atlas facing that same endless shuffle, that same cycle of hope and disappointment. On the 4th day, Maria pulled her aside. "We're out of time, Ash. If he doesn't show some improvement, the board wants to transfer him to a behavioral facility." You know what that means. Ashley's heart thudded, a mix of anger and fear. Just give me a little more time. I have an idea. That night, Ashley drafted a plea on her own social media. Nothing slick, just the truth. Atlas needs someone to believe in him, not just for a day or a headline, but for the long haul. If you've ever felt lost, if you've ever needed someone to give you a second chance, please help. She attached a new photo. Atlas, eyes barely visible behind the bars, one paw resting protectively on the suitcase. Within hours, messages flooded in, some cruel, but many kind. Offers of help, stories of rescue, and from one quiet, unexpected corner, a simple message from a teacher. "My student Ethan would like to meet Atlas. He doesn't speak much, but maybe they can help each other." Ashley stared at the message for a long time, her hope flickering like a candle in the wind. The rescue center buzzed with the tension of deadlines and the constant churn of incoming cases, But a stillness seemed to gather whenever Atlas was mentioned. By the end of the week, his story had already taken on a strange gravity. Staff and volunteers argued quietly about his future, some rooting for him, others resigned to the possibility that his trauma was simply too deep. It was in this atmosphere, fraught with hope and dread, that Ethan Lee arrived. Ethan was 7, his dark hair a little too long, his hands always fidgeting in the sleeves of his jacket. He hadn't spoken a single word since the accident a year ago, a crash that left his family shattered and the world, for Ethan, drained of all sound. His mother, Mrs. Lee, had emailed the shelter, asking if her son could visit Atlas. "He doesn't talk," she wrote, "but he loves animals, and he's never stopped drawing." Maria met them at the door, her manner brisk but kind, while Ashley watched from across the lobby, the sense of something momentous stirring in her gut. Ethan clutched a well-worn sketchbook to his chest, his eyes darting around as the sounds of barking dogs filled the space. He moved with a hesitance Ashley recognized instantly, the careful shuffle of someone afraid to disturb the world around him. Ashley knelt beside Ethan, her smile gentle. "Hey, I'm Ashley. You here to meet Atlas?" Ethan nodded, not speaking, and offered her a drawing, a pencil sketch of a dog curled around a suitcase, its eyes wide and sad. Ashley felt her heart catch. Inside the kennel room, the air was thick with the familiar tang of disinfectant and stress. Atlas lay curled in his corner, muzzle resting on the suitcase, tail unmoving. Ashley and Maria watched as Ethan settled onto the concrete floor, cross-legged, just a few feet from the bars. He didn't try to touch Atlas or call him over. Instead, he quietly opened his sketchbook and began to draw. Minutes passed. Ashley held her breath, waiting for some sign, a whimper, a bark, even a growl. Instead, a strange calm settled over the space. The usual chaos of the shelter faded to a distant hum. Atlas lifted his head, just slightly, ears twitching as Ethan's pencil scratched softly across the page. For an hour, the two simply shared the same space. Ethan sketched, every now and then glancing at Atlas with a quiet intensity, as if memorizing the lines of his fur, the sadness in his eyes. Slowly, achingly, Atlas shifted. He watched the boy, then inched forward, nose pressed to the bars. Ethan didn't flinch. He tore out a page from his sketchbook, a drawing of Atlas, suitcase and all, and slid it under the kennel gate. Atlas sniffed the paper, then, with a trembling movement, laid his paw gently on the sketch. Ashley saw the change immediately. Atlas's breathing slowed, his body relaxing for the first time since arriving. Maria's hand went to her mouth, her eyes wide. "He's never done that," she whispered. Mrs. Lee watched her son, a faint smile on her lips, but tears bright in her eyes. "It's the most peaceful he's been since the accident." Ashley sat down beside Ethan, her voice barely a whisper. "You've got away with him. Would you like to come back tomorrow?" Ethan nodded, hope flickering in his eyes. He tore out another page, a simple drawing of two figures, a boy and a dog, sitting together beneath a stormy sky. He pressed it into Ashley's hand, and she felt something in herself soften, the tightness of anxiety loosening for the first time all week. From that day forward, Ethan visited every afternoon. The staff watched, at first with curiosity, then with awe, as Atlas began to change. The puppy, once locked in a shell of grief and fear, started to eat his food, but only when Ethan was near. The two would sit for hours, sometimes with Ethan reading picture books in a soft, breathy murmur, sometimes with nothing but silence passing between them. Ashley made a habit of sneaking into the observation room to watch, unable to explain why these quiet sessions filled her with so much hope. One evening, as the shelter closed and the fluorescent lights flickered off, Ashley found Ethan and Atlas in their usual spot. Ethan had pressed his hand through the bars, palm up, and Atlas rested his chin on it, eyes closed in quiet trust. Ashley felt tears well up, an overwhelming gratitude flooding her chest. That night, a storm rolled in over the city again. Thunder rattling windows, rain sweeping down in sheets. Ashley lay awake in bed, thinking of all the nights she'd spent clutching her own fears like a suitcase she couldn't let go of. She wondered what story lived inside Atlas's battered case, what grief it carried, and whether love, strange and silent as it was, might finally begin to heal what had been broken. News of the bond between Ethan and Atlas spread, first among staff, then online. Volunteers began to leave small gifts at Atlas's kennel: a squeaky ball, a soft blanket, a hand-painted sign reading, "Hope lives here." Parents wrote letters, sharing their own stories of loss, struggle, and recovery. People who'd never set foot in a shelter sent cards and donations, hoping, perhaps, that a boy who wouldn't speak and a puppy who wouldn't move might save each other. In those days, something fragile and beautiful took root at the shelter. Not just hope for Atlas or for Ethan, but for every person who'd ever felt left behind or unfixable. The world, for a little while, seemed to grow quieter, gentler, a place where broken things could rest, side by side, and begin, at last, to mend. Ashley always believed healing started small. A gentle word, a steady hand, a simple act of kindness repeated over and over until trust replaced fear. In the weeks that followed Ethan's first visit, the Santa Monica Rescue Center became something different. Less an institution, more a sanctuary for wounded souls. The staff started calling Ethan and Atlas the quiet pair, and every day their ritual brought new hope to a place often starved for it. Ashley approached Maria about a new idea. What if we try supervised home visits? Atlas needs a quieter space and Ethan's mom is willing. I'll handle transportation and stay the whole time. Maria was hesitant. Liability forms, insurance, the center's rules, they were all stacked against anything out of the ordinary. But she'd seen the way Atlas watched Ethan, how the puppy's tail would thump once or twice when Ethan entered the room, the way Ethan would linger by the kennel as if drawing strength just from being near Atlas. All right, Maria agreed finally, but you have to promise me you'll be careful. One setback and we're back to square one. Ashley nodded, feeling a tremor of hope she hadn't allowed herself in years. The first visit was awkward. Atlas refused to walk from the car to Ethan's apartment unless the battered blue suitcase came too. He strained at his leash, whimpering in panic whenever it was out of sight. So Ashley carried the suitcase up the narrow stairs, her arms aching, and only then did Atlas shuffle after her, eyes wide and wary. Inside Ethan's small room, sunlight streamed through faded curtains. Posters of cartoon animals covered the walls, and there was a pile of plush toys on the bed, all arranged neatly as if waiting for company. Ethan sat cross-legged on the rug, his sketchbook open, a nervous smile flickering at the corners of his mouth. His mom watched from the doorway, worry and hope blending in her gaze. Atlas paced the room, circling anxiously, never letting the suitcase out of his sight. Ethan understood, moving slowly and never reaching out too fast. He showed Atlas his favorite toy, a dog-eared plush fox, and set it carefully next to the suitcase. Atlas sniffed it, then looked away, ears pinned back. For a while, nothing happened. The clock ticked. Ethan drew quietly. Atlas lay near the suitcase, shivering at every noise from the street. It was hard for Ashley to watch. She'd hoped for an instant breakthrough, something cinematic and beautiful. Instead, there was only the slow ache of waiting, the fragile hope that maybe tomorrow would be a little easier. But healing doesn't happen in a flash. It happens in moments so small you almost miss them. The next visit, Atlas edged a little closer to Ethan. The one after that, he let Ethan rest a hand on his fur for a moment, before flinching away. By the end of the week, Ashley caught them both napping on the rug, Ethan's head on a pillow, Atlas curled with his nose pressed to the suitcase, breathing slow and even. Late at night, Ethan would wake up from nightmares, sometimes crying, sometimes simply silent and shaking. Ashley, dozing on the couch, would hear the quiet footsteps. She'd find Atlas already at Ethan's side, the boy clutching the puppy and the suitcase in a tangled embrace. They looked so small, so breakable that Ashley's heart ached. One evening after Ethan had fallen asleep, Ashley sat at the kitchen table with Mrs. Lee. The mother's voice was soft, tired. Ethan was never like this before. He used to be so loud. After the accident, it's like the whole world closed off for him. Ashley nodded. Atlas, too. I think they understand each other in ways we can't. Mrs. Lee glanced at the darkened bedroom where Ethan and Atlas slept in the quiet glow of a nightlight. Thank you for giving them both a chance. The visits continued, and rituals formed. Ethan always brought his sketchbook, drawing new pictures of Atlas, sometimes with wings, sometimes wearing a superhero cape. He began leaving these drawings tucked into the suitcase, as if they might ward off the bad dreams. Atlas started bringing his own offerings, a chewed toy, a scrap of blanket, all placed carefully by the battered case. Ashley saw something else change, too. Atlas wasn't the only one learning how to trust again. Ethan, who once shrank from any new face, started smiling at Ashley, then at Maria, then even at the volunteers at the shelter. He began to speak, not in words, but with gestures, laughter, and drawings that said what language could not. One evening, as dusk painted the city in gold and lavender, Ethan sat quietly at the foot of his bed, sketching by the window. Atlas circled once, then lay down beside him. For the first time, the suitcase stayed on the far side of the room. Atlas rested his head on Ethan's leg, sighing as if releasing the last breath of worry he'd carried since the storm. Ethan drew a picture. Himself and Atlas side by side, the suitcase far behind them. He handed it to Ashley. "It's us," he said softly, the first words anyone had heard from him in months. Ashley blinked back tears. In that fragile, perfect moment, two broken things made each other whole, if only for an evening. Back at the shelter, Ashley hung Ethan's drawing on the bulletin board, a silent reminder that even the most battered lives could find light again. It was not a miracle, not yet, but it was the start of something precious, a hope that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow would be kinder. Some nights in Los Angeles are quiet, gentle with the hush of distant traffic and the sea breeze drifting through half-open windows. But there are other nights when storms crawl in from the coast, filling the sky with thunder and the city with a restless, electric energy. This was one of those nights, a night that would change everything for Atlas and Ethan. The day had ended well. Ashley had dropped Atlas off at Ethan's apartment for another supervised visit. For once, Atlas seemed almost calm, even playful. He nosed through the suitcase with a little less desperation, nudged Ethan's hand for treats, even lay belly up for a few precious seconds to let Ethan scratch his chest. Ethan had laughed, a sound so pure and unexpected that his mother stood in the hallway and wept quietly into her hands. By evening, the sky turned slate gray, and distant thunder rolled over the rooftops. The air felt thick with expectation. Ashley was on the phone with Maria, reporting the progress and sharing cautious optimism, when the first cracks of lightning flashed across the horizon. Then the rain started, hard and fast, battering the windows with a steady roar. The power flickered. Ethan's mom went around the apartment lighting candles, her movements brisk, but her eyes worried. Atlas was pacing, hackles up, tail tucked, every muscle tense. Ashley recognized the signs of panic in the dog, the quick, shallow breaths, the way his eyes darted to every shadow. "It's okay, buddy. It's just a storm," she murmured, crouching next to him. But Atlas wasn't listening. The thunder grew louder, rattling the apartment. A crack of lightning split the sky, followed by a shuddering boom. In that instant, Atlas bolted. It happened so fast. 1 second he was there, the next he had wrenched free from his leash, his focus locked on the suitcase by the door. He grabbed it in his jaws, dragging it behind him as he shot down the hallway, his nails scraping the hardwood. "Atlas!" Ashley shouted, sprinting after him, heart pounding. Ethan, wide-eyed and trembling, stared as his friend disappeared out the front door. For a moment, he was frozen in shock. Then, before anyone could stop him, he ran after Atlas into the rain. The chaos was immediate. Ashley yelled for Mrs. Lee to call for help, then grabbed her jacket and raced outside. The downpour was blinding, sheets of rain turning the street into a river of reflections. Flashes of lightning illuminated the night in staccato bursts. Atlas was already halfway down the block, Suitcase bouncing behind him, running as if his life depended on it. Ethan, small and determined, chased after him, his voice lost in the roar of the storm. Neighbors' lights snapped on as the commotion unfolded. Doors opened. People appeared with flashlights, umbrellas, raincoats, some joining the search, others just watching in concern. Someone called 911. Ashley ran through puddles, yelling Atlas's name, checking every alley and yard, her shoes soaked, adrenaline burning through her fear. The streets were a maze of confusion. The suitcase caught on fences and trash cans, slowing Atlas just enough that Ethan was able to close the distance. Ashley spotted them briefly as a bolt of lightning lit the sky, Ethan reaching out, Atlas circling back, both of them silhouettes against the angry glare. Then, suddenly, silence. The rain still poured, but the thunder moved further away, a deep rumble receding over the city. In the stillness, Ashley heard a voice, a real, desperate voice, cut through the night. "Atlas?" It was Ethan. He had spoken, the first word he'd uttered in over a year, raw and wild, shattering the spell that had kept him silent since the accident. Ashley's chest clenched. She followed the sound, calling for the others to help. They found Ethan and Atlas under a freeway bridge, huddled together in the shelter of a concrete arch. Atlas was curled protectively around the suitcase, his body pressed tightly against Ethan, both of them shaking, one from cold, the other from exhaustion and fear. Ethan's arms were wrapped around Atlas's neck, his face buried in the dog's fur. Ashley dropped to her knees beside them, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "You found him," she whispered, wrapping both boy and dog in her embrace. A crowd gathered, a handful of neighbors, Mrs. Lee, Maria, 2 police officers, even a local reporter who'd heard the call on the scanner. The rescue was already spreading online, videos and photos capturing the moment as Ethan's voice returned and Atlas's trust deepened. As they all walked home, Ethan still holding on to Atlas and the battered suitcase, Ashley felt something shift in the air. People reached out to offer help. Blankets, warm drinks. Neighbors she'd never met offered words of comfort and understanding. It felt, for the first time in a long time, like a community, people coming together because of a boy and his dog, and a story that refused to end in heartbreak. Later that night, Ethan fell asleep with Atlas curled at his side, the suitcase resting at their feet. Ashley watched them, grateful and awed, realizing that even on the stormiest nights, hope can find a way to shine through, especially when you refuse to give up on someone who needs you. Morning after the storm, sunlight poured across Los Angeles, as if to make up for the chaos of the night before. But inside the Santa Monica Rescue Center, the air was charged, tense with anticipation and nerves. The story of Ethan and Atlas had already become a local sensation. Pictures and videos of the wet, shivering pair under the freeway bridge were all over social media, news segments, and even national TV. People wanted to know what would happen next. Strangers stopped by the shelter, dropping off toys, blankets, treats, and hand-painted signs. Atlas and Ethan, hope lives here, but not everyone was convinced. In the cramped meeting room at the back of the shelter, a storm was brewing of a different kind. The board of directors sat around a battered oval table, their faces grim. Maria, as shelter manager, presided over the meeting, her usual composure strained by too many sleepless nights. Ashley was there too, clutching a stack of letters and drawings sent by local school children, her heart pounding. Ethan, for the first time, was sitting beside her. He looked small in his dress shirt, hands knotted tightly, but his jaw was set with a new kind of resolve. "We all know why we're here," began Mr. Donner, the board's chair, tapping a pen against his clipboard. "Atlas's case has brought national attention. That's good for donations, but it doesn't change our mission. Save the animals we can, but we can't save them all. Atlas is still considered a high-risk case. He panics, bolts, and he's attached to that suitcase in a way we've never seen. We have to decide, does he stay, or do we transfer him to the behavioral facility?" A murmur ran through the room. The behavioral facility was a euphemism, and everyone knew it. It was a last stop for dogs that didn't fit, that couldn't be adopted, that some believed would never be safe. For Ashley, the word felt like a death sentence. Maria looked around, her voice steady but pleading. "We've all seen the progress Atlas has made, especially with Ethan. The city is watching, and the community is rallying behind them. I think we owe it to both of them to consider another option." The board members exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a middle-aged woman named Cheryl, spoke up. "We're getting hundreds of calls every day. People want to help, but they also want reassurance. What if Atlas lashes out? What if something goes wrong?" Ashley rose to her feet, holding up Ethan's drawing, a bright, hopeful image of Atlas playing with children in a park. "I was in foster care as a kid," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "People gave up on me too. All I needed was one person to believe I was worth the risk. Atlas and Ethan found each other. They're helping each other heal, and that's something this community needs. We're not just saving a dog, we're showing every kid and every adult who's ever felt broken that there's hope." The room fell silent. Mr. Donner frowned, unconvinced. "Words are nice, Ashley, but what about the facts? Is Atlas ready for a forever home? Can you guarantee he won't panic again? All eyes turned to Ethan, who'd been quietly drawing in his lap. He looked up, meeting Mr. Donner's gaze. For a moment, the boy seemed to shrink under the weight of so many adult expectations. But then, softly, Ethan stood. He cleared his throat. The room waited, holding its breath. Ethan's mom, tears brimming, nodded encouragement. "He's my friend," Ethan said, voice small but unshakable. "He's scared sometimes, but so am I. When I'm with Atlas, I don't feel so afraid. I think he's trying to be brave, too." The effect was electric. A hush swept the room, then a ripple of emotion, sniffles, a few quiet gasps. Even Mr. Donner's stern expression softened. One of the other board members spoke up, her voice thick with feeling. "Maybe it's time we try something new. What if we created a trauma partnership program? Let Atlas and Ethan be the first pair. We could track their progress, work with therapists, and maybe, just maybe, help more kids and animals like them." Excitement began to build. Maria nodded. "We'd need to coordinate with child psychologists, dog trainers, and the community. But I think it's worth it." The vote that followed was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The motion passed. Atlas would stay. The trauma partnership program would launch, and Ethan and Atlas would be the first participants. News of the board's decision spread like wildfire. Volunteers cheered. Donors called in with renewed support. The story trended on social media, hashtags multiplying. Atlas and Ethan, new beginnings, crash, rescue, and recover. For Ashley, the relief was overwhelming. She hugged Ethan, who hugged Atlas, and for a moment, the three of them stood together at the heart of a storm they had survived. Outside, the community gathered. Children waved handmade signs. Reporters crowded the front steps. But at the center of the whirlwind stood a boy, a dog, and a battered blue suitcase, living proof that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not give up. Later, as dusk settled over the city, Ashley sat beside Ethan and Atlas in the park behind the shelter. She watched as Ethan tossed a tennis ball, and for the first time, Atlas ran, not away, not in fear, but toward something bright and good, his tail wagging with hope. Ashley wiped her eyes and realized this wasn't just about saving one dog. It was about saving them all, one brave step, one honest word, one act of faith at a time. It was almost surreal how quickly the Santa Monica Rescue Center changed after the board's decision. Flyers about the new trauma partnership program appeared everywhere, alongside hand-drawn pictures from neighborhood kids. Donations flooded in. Dog beds, treats, blankets, even stacks of sketchbooks and colored pencils for Ethan. Local news vans parked out front, eager to catch a glimpse of the miracle boy and his loyal dog. And as the city watched, Atlas and Ethan became unlikely ambassadors for hope. The first official event was at the city park, a bright Saturday morning where the grass gleamed and children, parents, and volunteers gathered beneath canopies and balloons. A children's hospital had invited Atlas and Ethan to join their Healing Day, where therapy dogs brought comfort to kids facing illness, fear, and the unknown. For the first time, Atlas was not just a rescue case. He was a guest of honor, and Ethan his trusted partner. Ashley woke early that morning, her nerves fluttering as she checked and rechecked the plans. Maria was there, rallying volunteers and shooing away nervous staff. Ethan, in his favorite blue hoodie, clutched Atlas's leash in one hand and his suitcase in the other. Atlas, freshly groomed but still unsure, stayed glued to Ethan's side, his tail wagging slow and uncertain. As they arrived, the crowd parted with gentle excitement. Some of the children reached out tentatively, hoping for a moment with the now famous Suitcase dog. At first, Atlas stiffened, but Ethan knelt beside him, whispering something only Atlas could hear. Slowly, Atlas allowed a young girl in a wheelchair to touch his ear. A boy with thick glasses leaned forward to offer Atlas a piece of his sandwich. Ashley watched, hardly breathing, as Atlas's tail began to thump with honest joy. The morning unfolded in a tapestry of small miracles. Ethan, who a few months ago would not even speak to his own mother, told his story to a circle of children, his voice soft but certain. He described the storm, the suitcase, and how Atlas taught him to feel safe again. The kids listened wide-eyed, some reaching for his hand, others hugging their own therapy dogs more tightly. At one point, a shy girl with a surgical mask on her face asked Ethan, "Why does Atlas carry that suitcase?" Ethan hesitated, looking to Ashley for reassurance. She nodded, and Ethan answered, "It's full of things that remind him he's loved. When I feel scared, I hold on to Atlas. When Atlas feels scared, he holds on to the suitcase. We help each other." The girl's eyes grew bright. She handed Ethan a sticker, a sparkly heart, asking him to put it on the suitcase for luck. Soon, other children followed, each adding their own colorful sticker or drawing, transforming the battered blue case into a patchwork of hope and kindness. Atlas let the children pet him, his body relaxing, tail wagging with a confidence no one had seen before. He let them drape his suitcase with ribbons and even tolerated a floppy hat for a photo. When the hospital's director called for a group picture, Atlas and Ethan stood in the center, surrounded by new friends, the suitcase bright and beautiful at their feet. Ashley watched from the sidelines, pride swelling in her chest. She noticed parents wiping their eyes, nurses snapping photos, and Maria blinking back tears. For so long, the shelter had been a place of desperate last chances, but today, it felt like a place of beginnings. The afternoon brought more surprises. The program's story was picked up by a national news outlet. Offers poured in from families across the country. "My daughter hasn't spoken since her accident. Can she meet Atlas and Ethan? My son is afraid of dogs, but your story gives us hope." Therapists and animal trainers volunteered their time, inspired by the transformation unfolding in front of them. Ethan, usually reserved, started to blossom. He told classmates at school about his little sister who had died in the accident, the first time he'd spoken of her outside his family. Atlas, sensing Ethan's emotion, pressed close, offering silent support. Afterward, Ethan hugged Atlas, whispering, "It's okay. We're both brave now." One afternoon, a frail girl with a walker made her way toward Atlas. She hugged him, burying her face in his fur. To everyone's amazement, Atlas leaned into her, his tail wagging energetically. The girl giggled, and the sound seemed to unlock something in Atlas. He turned and licked her hand, looking up at Ashley as if to say, "See? I'm not scared anymore." Ashley snapped a picture, capturing Atlas's bright eyes and the girl's radiant smile, a moment that would soon be shared across the country. Later, as the event ended, Ethan and Atlas sat on the grass, surrounded by drawings, ribbons, and notes of hope tucked into the suitcase. The park was quieter now, the sun dipping low. Ashley joined them, settling beside her two friends. For a long time they said nothing, simply soaking in the warmth of a day when broken things had come together and found joy. As the breeze rustled the leaves, Ethan leaned his head on Atlas, whispering, "We did it, didn't we?" Ashley nodded, her voice soft but full of wonder. "You did, and you're showing the whole world what healing looks like." Atlas's story, once one of abandonment and fear, had become a beacon, a story that families everywhere wanted to share. And for the first time, Ashley dared to believe that every ending really could be a new beginning. For a while, life seemed steady, almost peaceful. Atlas and Ethan, once two wounded souls, now moved through the world with newfound confidence. The trauma partnership program at the Santa Monica Rescue Center flourished, and every week brought new families seeking healing. There were days spent in sunlit parks, afternoons at the Children's Hospital, and evenings where Ethan and Atlas simply napped together. Their battered suitcase nestled at their feet like an old friend. But just as everything began to feel safe, a storm neither of them could see approached, one that would test everything they'd built together. It began on a Monday. Ashley arrived at the shelter to find Maria and a pair of police officers waiting in the lobby. Maria's face was drawn, anxious. "Ashley, we need to talk," she said, voice low. She led Ashley to her office, where a heavy-set man in cheap clothes sat slumped in a chair. He wore the weary, suspicious look of someone used to being disappointed, and his eyes kept flicking to the door. In his hands, he clutched a wrinkled court order. "My name's Ray Fenton," he said, the words gruff. "I'm Atlas's owner. Or I was until I went away. I want him back." Ashley's breath caught. The story spilled out quickly. Ray had been arrested months earlier. Petty theft, drugs, a life full of broken promises and restarts. With no one to care for his dog, he'd left Atlas with a friend, hoping for the best. When he got out of jail, Atlas was gone. The battered suitcase, it turned out, was all Ray could leave behind. A feeble attempt at comfort for a dog he could no longer protect. "I messed up," Ray admitted, his gaze hard but desperate. "But I'm clean now. I did my time. I want another chance with my dog. He's all I've got." Ashley felt anger and pity battle inside her. She knew how systems worked, how easy it was to lose everything in a moment of weakness. But she also knew what Atlas meant to Ethan, to the program, to the whole community. Maria's hands shook as she passed Ashley the court summons. "There's going to be a hearing. Tomorrow." Word spread quickly. The news ran wild. "Atlas's real owner returns!" The headlines screamed, and suddenly the world that had rallied around Atlas and Ethan was divided. Some argued Ray deserved a second chance. That redemption was what rescue was all about. Others, including most of the local families, insisted that Atlas had found his true home, that tearing him away now would only deepen old wounds. Ashley barely slept that night, her thoughts a tangled web of fear, hope, and responsibility. She sat at her kitchen table, rereading the note that had first come with Atlas. "He needs peace. Please save him." She thought of all the ways saving someone wasn't simple or clean or even fair. At the courthouse the next morning, the air crackled with tension. The courtroom was small, but every seat was full. Friends, volunteers, neighbors, a few journalists, and more than one curious stranger. Ethan sat with his mother, Atlas pressed close to his leg, suitcase at his side. Ray Fenton sat with a court-appointed lawyer, his hands twisting together, gaze fixed on the floor. The judge, an older woman with tired eyes but a sharp voice, began the hearing by stating the facts. Ray was the legal owner on paper, but Atlas had been rescued, fostered, and transformed in the time since. Now the question was about more than ownership. It was about what was best for Atlas and for Ethan, who had spoken for the first time in a year because of this dog. Testimony unfolded in waves. Ashley spoke about the night she found Atlas, his trauma, and the slow, painstaking healing that followed. Maria described the trauma partnership program and how many children had found hope through Atlas and Ethan's story. Ethan's mother, voice trembling, explained how her son's world had grown larger and safer with Atlas by his side. Finally, it was Ray's turn. He stood, shuffling awkwardly, and spoke in a voice that was both defiant and vulnerable. "I know I did wrong. I know I let Atlas down. But I'm trying to do better. All I want is a chance to make it right." The judge nodded, thoughtful but unmoved. Then she turned to Ethan. "Ethan, do you want to tell me what Atlas means to you?" The courtroom was silent. For a moment, it seemed Ethan might not answer. He looked at Atlas, at the battered suitcase, then up at the judge. "He's the part of me that's not afraid anymore," Ethan said softly. "He helps me be brave. I help him too. We're family now." The words hung in the air, raw and true. Even Ray wiped his eyes, the fight leaving his shoulders. The judge leaned forward. "That's the most important answer I could have heard." After a pause, she delivered her ruling. "The law can't always fix the past, but it can protect the future. I'm granting permanent custody of Atlas to Ethan and his family. Mr. Fenton, if you truly love your dog, I hope you'll support what's best for him. Maybe there's another way you can be part of his life, but not as his owner." A collective sigh swept the room. Tears, applause, relief. As the courtroom emptied, Ray approached Ethan, kneeling to look him in the eye. "You take care of him, okay?" he said. Ethan nodded solemnly, and together they placed the battered suitcase at Atlas's feet. That evening, back at home, Ethan, Atlas, and Ashley sat together in the glow of the setting sun, their family stronger than ever. The old fears had not vanished, but they had learned how to face them, together as a new kind of family, shaped by courage, kindness, and the belief that even broken things could find a home. For the first time in years, Ashley felt a deep, unfamiliar quiet settle inside her life. It wasn't the hush of fear or loneliness, but the gentle silence that follows after a storm, when the world seems to pause and breathe. She noticed it in small moments. Over breakfast as Ethan laughed at Atlas chasing a sunbeam across the kitchen tiles, or at night when she tucked the boy and his dog in with the battered suitcase curled nearby, a relic that had transformed from a symbol of abandonment to one of hope. In those peaceful days, Ashley found herself reflecting on the unexpected shape her life had taken. As a child, she'd learned that to survive meant carrying her pain alone, packing it tight and silent into metaphorical suitcases that she kept locked up. In foster care, she'd moved from place to place, always on edge, never certain if she'd be wanted in the morning. It was only later, through years of trial and error, that she learned the truth. No one gets better alone. That lesson had always felt a little embarrassing in a country that worshipped self-reliance and stoic independence. She thought of the old American myths, of lone cowboys, of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. But watching Ethan and Atlas, she realized those stories were only part of the truth. Real strength was not about hiding pain, but about sharing it, offering and accepting help, admitting when you're scared, and letting others see the messiness of your healing. She began journaling in the evenings, often with Atlas's head in her lap and Ethan drawing at her side. One night she wrote, "A broken soul recognizes another. In caring for Atlas and Ethan, I found the courage to heal myself." Meanwhile, Ethan's world expanded in ways both subtle and profound. The shy, silent boy who once clung to the safety of his bedroom now ventured into the shelter after school, volunteering to help other kids draw, paint, or simply sit with animals too frightened to trust. His voice, at first hesitant, grew more confident. Sometimes he read books to the younger children, or showed them how to let a trembling puppy sniff their hand before petting it. Atlas, too, blossomed. No longer terrified of every loud noise, he learned to greet strangers, to accept treats and head pats, and to join Ethan for walks around the neighborhood. Gone was the nervous, shivering puppy who'd refused to eat or move without his suitcase. Now, Atlas ran through the park, barked joyfully at the mail carrier, and even allowed other children to hold his leash on gentle outings. Yet, Atlas never truly forgot his past, nor did Ethan, nor Ashley. Healing was not a straight line, and there were nights when thunderstorms brought old fears rushing back. On those evenings, Ethan would find Atlas curled up by the suitcase, and the two would huddle close until the worst had passed. Ashley would sit with them, sometimes in silence, sometimes humming softly, a gentle anchor until calm returned. The battered suitcase itself became a symbol for the entire program. Its faded blue surface was soon covered with painted handprints, notes of encouragement, and drawings from children and families who'd found hope through Atlas and Ethan's story. "You're not alone," read one note in a child's careful handwriting. "Thank you for helping me not be afraid anymore," said another. The shelter's Trauma Partnership program drew national attention. Local universities sent graduate students to study its impact. Social workers visited from across the country, and animal rescue groups requested training on how to match children and animals for mutual healing. Families drove hours just to meet Atlas and Ethan, hoping to find a spark of what they'd witnessed online or on TV. In therapy sessions, Ashley often talked about the suitcase. "We all carry things from our pain," she'd say. "Sometimes we try to lock it away, but the truth is, the suitcase only grows heavier until we find someone strong enough to help us carry it, or brave enough to help us open it up." She watched as parents, once ashamed of their children's struggles, now joined group sessions to share their own wounds and hopes. The message spread. Asking for help was not weakness, but the very foundation of recovery and community. Ethan, for his part, developed his own rituals of healing. Every Friday, he'd invite the new kids at the shelter to paint or write a message on the suitcase, reminding them that their stories mattered too. Sometimes Atlas would curl up beside a frightened child, laying his head in their lap. Other times, Ethan would quietly tell a new friend, "It's okay if you're scared. Me and Atlas were scared too, but it gets better." And so, the story of Atlas and Ethan became something bigger than either of them. It was a living example that America's greatest strength was not rugged individualism, but radical interdependence, the kind that binds strangers together, that transforms scars into connection, that finds meaning in even the most broken places. On the anniversary of the first night they'd found Atlas, the shelter held a day of healing. Dozens of families gathered, each bringing a piece of their own story, each ready to add their voice to a growing chorus of hope. As Ashley looked around at the crowd, at parents hugging their children, at dogs playing in the grass, at Ethan beaming as Atlas ran free, she realized that love, when shared, truly could turn every ending into a new beginning. That night, as the city quieted and the last guests left, Ashley sat with Ethan and Atlas under a sky lit by stars. The battered suitcase was beside them, covered now in messages of thanks and hope, no longer heavy with loss. She listened to Ethan laugh, to Atlas's soft sigh, and she understood. The burdens we carry don't define us. What matters is what we build from them: compassion, courage, and connection. That, she thought, was their true legacy. There's a particular kind of light in Los Angeles as summer wanes, a golden haze that softens the edges of buildings and makes even tired streets feel touched by hope. For Ashley, Ethan, and Atlas, that light carried a sense of homecoming. Their lives had become something larger than themselves, a ripple effect of kindness and courage that had touched a city, then a country. The Santa Monica Rescue Center had never been busier. What was once a cramped, overworked shelter was now the center of a growing movement, the Trauma Partnership Program. Children and animals arrived from all over California and beyond, seeking comfort, healing, and connection. University researchers came to study the program's success. News outlets returned to document the steady stream of families who found hope where there had once been only heartbreak. But no day was more special than the annual Day of Healing, a citywide festival born from Ethan and Atlas's story. The event took place in the park, where Atlas had first wagged his tail for a stranger, where Ethan had shared his pain and his courage. Bright tents dotted the lawn, each one run by volunteers, local businesses, and families who'd once been on the other side of rescue. The festival began with a parade. At the front walked Ethan, now taller, confidence blooming in every step. He wore a t-shirt painted with Atlas's paw print and led the way with Ashley beside him, Maria waving to the crowds, and Atlas walking proudly at Ethan's side. Kids followed, some pulling decorated wagons with their own adopted dogs, others carrying colorful signs. Healing starts here, you're not alone, and thank you, Atlas. The battered blue suitcase, now a tapestry of painted handprints, hearts, and hopeful messages, rode on a small cart festooned with ribbons. People stopped to add new messages. Stickers, hand-drawn pictures, notes of thanks. Some simply placed their hand on it and closed their eyes, whispering wishes for themselves or for someone they loved. At the festival's heart stood a tent where families could share their stories. Some spoke of grief, loss, or trauma. Others talked of adoption, of learning to trust again, of rediscovering joy. Ashley listened to each voice, holding the space for tears and laughter alike, sometimes sharing her own journey, how a battered puppy and a silent boy had changed her life forever. Throughout the day, Atlas and Ethan made their rounds, visiting each group. Atlas was a different dog now. He greeted strangers with calm eyes and a gently wagging tail, letting children hug him and tuck tiny trinkets into his fur. Ethan, too, had changed. His voice was steady, his laughter quick, his shyness transformed into empathy for others. When a family arrived with a trembling dog rescued from a recent fire, Ethan sat with the girl holding its leash. He told her, "It's okay to be scared. Atlas was scared for a long time. We helped him, and he helped us. You're already doing the most important thing, loving him." Ashley watched as the girl's shoulders relaxed, her grip loosening on the leash, and the dog took its first shaky step toward the waiting grass. Maria, ever the organizer, gave a speech as the sun reached its peak. She thanked the community for their support, the staff and volunteers for their tireless work, and all the children and animals for teaching everyone what true healing meant. Every act of rescue, Maria said, is also an act of self-renewal. When we save others, we rediscover our own hope. As the afternoon faded into evening, Ashley found herself reflecting on the journey. She saw it in the painted suitcase, in the joyful chaos of the park, in the faces of strangers become friends. She realized that true resilience wasn't about pretending scars didn't exist. It was about honoring them, letting them show, letting them teach. and letting them be bridges to connection. Later, in the golden hour, Ethan stood on a small stage, holding Atlas's leash as the crowd gathered. The sun painted his face in light and shadow, and his words carried farther than he ever could have imagined a year ago. When I first met Atlas, I was afraid of everything. I thought I'd never feel safe again. But Atlas needed me, and I needed him. We learned that being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It just means you help each other anyway. I hope everyone here finds a friend like that. And I hope you remember, you're not alone. There was not a dry eye in the crowd. Even Ray Fenton, Atlas's first owner, now volunteering as a mentor for others in recovery, stood clapping, his own dog by his side. As the last rays of sun slipped behind the trees, the crowd gathered for one final moment. Each person wrote a note, something they wanted to let go of, or something they hoped for, and placed it in the battered suitcase. Children hugged Atlas, families posed for pictures, and laughter rose into the soft, summer sky. Back at home, Ashley, Ethan, and Atlas settled on the porch, the suitcase between them. They read a few of the notes aloud, hopes for courage, wishes for healing, dreams of new beginnings. Ashley felt a peace deeper than any she'd ever known. The suitcase, once heavy with sorrow, was now filled with possibility. That night, as Ethan drifted to sleep with Atlas curled at his feet, Ashley wrote her last journal entry about the journey. Love is the thread that ties even the most broken stories together. Every ending, if we let it, becomes a new beginning. The burdens we carry don't define us. What we build from them, compassion, courage, connection, becomes our true legacy. As the city settled into quiet, the memory of the storm that began it all felt far away. Just another chapter in a story that would keep growing, long after the last page. In their home, under a sky filled with new stars, a boy, a dog, and a battered suitcase proved that healing, once shared, can echo forever.